All right, we are live. Hello, and welcome to another Code and Supply live stream. Tonight is Lightning Talk night. I'm super excited to present the program tonight. We've got a mix of live speakers as well as a couple of pre-recorded talks, and we've got some really great stuff for you. Before we get into that, I've got some like words from the Code and Supply. How a little bit about us, a little bit about how you can support us and get engaged with the community. So, first and foremost, Code and Supply is a membership driven organization. Your membership to Code and Supply helps power everything that we do. It starts at $10 a month for a basic support level. $20 a month gets you some cool stuff, some perks. And then there's co-working memberships that are get you access to our co-working space. Our co-working space has been nominated for Best Co-working Space in Pittsburgh for 2022. How weird and cool is that? Through Pittsburgh City Paper, a well-known media outlet here in Pittsburgh, and it's just super exciting that we've been nominated for that. Best of Pittsburgh's been going on for a very long time now, and it's really cool to be not only nominated but make it into the finalists. So please go to codeandsupply.co/x/bestofberg, or grab out your fancy phone and fire up the camera and scan that QR code for a quick thing on your phone. You'll be able to punch in your email address and vote that way. We've got merch, all kinds of shirts from our conferences and random stuff related to cats and corgis and network diagrams and everything. Go check that out at codeandsupply.co/store. Lastly, our job board. Check out codeandsupply.co/jobs. You can see the several jobs that we've got posted. You can also post your jobs. Anybody who gives Code and Supply money is allowed to post a job. Anybody who joins Code and Supply, whether paying or not, is able to see the entirety of the job post and be able to apply using the application instructions that are there. We send out a monthly jobs newsletter on or around the 15th of the month. And any of the jobs that are posted in there end up getting syndicated out to Twitter and Slack and to get included in that monthly newsletter. Yeah, I think that's about it. Here's my smiling face before we get into a little bit of introduction. So our first speaker tonight is a pre-recorded talk with Jean Lange. Jean Lange is a longtime friend of mine. I've actually probably known her longer than a lot of people in Pittsburgh. She was a longtime coworker. And she is going to be, she is an instructor at Academy Pittsburgh, one of the boot camps here in Pittsburgh. And she's going to talk about saying no. And here we are with Code and Supply's Lightning Talks night for August 22. Jean Lange on saying no.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to my lightning talk about saying no. I am speaking to you, the audience of the future, because I'm recording this last night, and it's really tough for me to talk to just the screen without talking to human beings. So I'm here with you now in my mind, time traveling. I am probably unqualified to give this lightning talk for the sheer fact that I'm here giving it right now instead of saying no, I don't have room in my life for it. I love saying yes to lightning talks. I love it. Let's see how this one goes in a recorded version so that tonight, here when I'm with you, speaking to you, instead I can be out on a date with my husband who I really wanted to say yes to. All right. Saying no is a really important life skill. Also, its sibling, hearing no. Jean, you might ask, are you going to tell me about why it's such an important life skill? No. Moving on. There is lots to talk about this topic, but this is a lightning talk, so we're going to cover just a few things. All right, here are some things I want to talk about saying no. The first thing to understand is that saying that no is a complete sentence, all on its own, complete, right? But there are also other shapes that you can give to it besides using it as a complete sentence. Complete sentence, valid option. Also, you can say no and, no but, or no thanks. There are ways that you can shape and direct the conversation after you say no, and understanding that can really help you in figuring out how to say no in a way that works for you in the situation that you're in. The second thing I want to talk about here is considering when it's important to you to say no and when it's important to you to say yes. For me, I love saying yes to things. When someone asks me to do something that matches my skill set and that I would enjoy doing, I love saying yes to that. But there are so many things in this world to do. And if I say yes to all of them, then I've effectively said no to all of them because I don't have the time or energy to actually devote to them. And so for me, learning how to say no is important because it allows me to really say yes to the things that I want to. Knowing your reason behind why you would say no to some things or yes to some things, I think can also help you learn to say no better. And speaking of learning to say no better, it's really important to know that saying no is a skill. You can practice it, you can get better at it, you can use it differently in different situations. Another skill I've been practicing is working with poi. You swing them around, their weight's on the end of a string. Sometimes I hit myself in the face. It's painful. It makes me want to sit down and cry. That's not the point of learning poi, but it happens during it. You might mess up when you're learning to say no too. That's okay if you have a larger why beyond that for why you want to learn how to say no. All right, let's do some practice together and put some practical bits on this. Here I have a whole bunch of situations in which I might be interested in saying no, and they all sort of wrap up together under the same umbrella of someone asks you for something and you don't actively want to give it to them. Maybe you might be okay with giving it to them. Maybe you're not sure if you want to give it to them or not, but you don't actively want to. So these are situations in which you could say no. Remember, there are different ways to say no, different ways you might want the conversation to go afterwards. Here are some things to remember in these situations, right? One, you can say no. It is an option for you. I know that's a big statement, right? There may be some situations in which you don't feel like you can say no, or in which it's not safe for you to say no. But I do think that saying no is an option far more often than people tend to think it is. And it's an important thing to internalize that you are allowed to say no to things. Second of all, I want to remind you that you don't have to tell the person you're saying no to why you're saying no. Sometimes just no is all you want to tell them or give to them. Sometimes you want to tell them the reason. An important tip, don't just tell them the reason. I'll give you an example in a moment. Say no clearly if no is what you mean. Help them understand that you're at no and then where you want to go from there. Important tip, you can pause. If you're not sure if you want to say yes or no to something, you can notice that and stop for a second and think about it. And what was your salary at your previous job? I'm not going to tell you that information. There's a no. Just as it's okay to say no to things and you have that option, you don't always have to answer someone immediately. Even immediately within that moment, you can say, let me get back to you on that. I need to think about it. Valid also. All right, let's look at how you could answer some of these questions here when someone asks you for something that you don't actively want to give to them. And I'm going to look at it with different ways I want to take the conversation afterwards, right? So when the interviewer says to you, what was your salary at your previous job? I'm not going to answer that question. That's a no as a complete sentence. Not giving them anything else. The ball is in their court for figuring out how to respond to that. That's an okay thing to do. If I would like to teach this person more, I might say more than that no. I might say, I'm not going to answer that question, and I believe it is inappropriate for you to ask it of me. What reason do you have that is okay for asking for that information? Um, you've taken the ball there and advanced it more than it was at before. Let's talk about, can I have one of your drinks from the fridge, right? Here's an example where you don't want to give just the reason. Imagine the conversation went this way. Hey, can I have one of your drinks from the fridge? Oh, those are special drinks that I brought in just for myself. Did you just say no? Maybe you mean you can have one if they replace it? Maybe you mean, okay, you can have one, but I'm reluctant about it. You really haven't given them a clear indication of what your stance is on the topic there. Just it's somewhere fuzzy in between active consent and active rejection. I that's a soft no. We want to go for a clear no. Can I have one of your drinks in the fridge? Not right now. Um, Thank you for asking. That's a no thanks, right? Cool. There are some examples of those. Oh, one more example I want to talk about here. Someone random on the street calls out your name, calls out to you, hey, what's your name? A common response to this, a way that you can respond to it, and that I use somewhat frequently, is to kind of ignore them and pretend you didn't hear them. That's also a soft no. It's also perhaps a safety question, right? Keep my headphones on, keep my eyes straight ahead, keep on looking at my phone, whatever I'm doing, do not acknowledge that that happened. That sometimes leads to them continuing to bother you, where a clearer no might not have. Like, hey, what's your name? No thanks. Maybe that would work, maybe it wouldn't. Depends on the situation. But it's important to know that you have that option about how direct and clear the communication of the no is for you. All right, here are some examples. The last one, when a person tries to hand you something, you don't have to take it. You can keep your hands wherever they are with whatever you're doing. You can ask them what it is or why you would want to take it, or just say, no, thank you. It's okay to not take the thing from them. Let's talk about some different types of situations. These types of situations are one in which you have a list and it's already completely full and you're being asked to add to it. The common one at work, right, is your manager asks you to do another task. Can you run a retrospective next week? Hope you're thinking in the background, oh boy, my schedule is completely full. I'm already going to need to spend some extra time to do this. I really need some room in here, and you're trying to add another thing to it. This is a situation where there's a power dynamic that makes it feel difficult to just say no. Here's a technique for that you can ask them to help you with the situation that you've got. Can you run a retrospective next week? Well, here are the things I already have on my plate. Which of them are less important than that retrospective? What should I drop or push back further in order to do that? Does it make sense for someone else to do it? Similarly, when a friend asks you to do something that you really would like to do and that would be great, but you really don't have time for it in your life, when you're already at capacity, there are ways to say no to that also, even though it's not a power dynamic, it's a relationship dynamic situation, right? You don't want to always say no to your friends because then they'll stop asking you at some point. Here's how I say no to that one. I'm going to have to say no this time, but I really love the offer and I would love to do something with you at some point. Can we look at next week to see if something would work then? Or can you please make this invitation again next time this situation arises? I would like to do it then. I can't tonight. I often end up with overwhelming to-do lists where I know I am not going to be able to get all the things on them done. A good exercise for me at that point is to write down the list and cross some things off of it, and not as done, but as I'm just not going to get to these today. Uh, Often I tend to try to push things toward the top, like I really am going to do these. Sometimes it can really help to let some things drop off and say, no, this is not going to happen today. It is not my top priority. That's what we have time for. I want you to take away from this, hopefully, some amount of reflection on the topic of saying no, about when it's important to do it for you and how you can. I want you to know that you can practice, um, and think about situations where you might want to. And I want to encourage you to say what you mean clearly in situations that you're in. No, thank you.
All right, that was Jean Lange. Please give a round of applause of sorts to Jean. I wish you would have been able to join us tonight, but we're very happy to have her have time to pre-record her talk. Saying no is a skill that I am very much developing, and those of you on the stream who know me know that Sarah's already got a big smile on her face, that I have a pretty hard time saying no to things, and Jean's been an inspiration to me in learning how best to say no. Our next speaker tonight at some lightning talk night is Craig Lange. And Craig has a video for us of his talk. He is on the talk. Craig, do you want to say anything before I play?
Yeah, one of the things I really found from coworkers about this talk is that they've said that these tools have been things that they've been using, so much that they didn't even realize they've been using them for years. And I've gotten a lot of feedback in the sense of people have said that, yes, this sort of seems like, the things that have helped me, learn Python and learn new things in Python. So I was quite surprised when I put this talk together that it actually, resonated with so many people that, for a 5-minute lightning talk, this was probably the one that I made that, hit home with so many people, that was so popular. So, and I definitely, jumped at the chance to share this with everybody tonight. So I was excited to do that. And if anybody has any questions, I'm definitely, here to talk about it or answer some questions.
All right. Thanks, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
And now, ready to go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk for PyOhio 2022. Your Python multi-tool, 4 built-ins and a module. Any links or references mentioned during this presentation will be collected into a companion web page. The items I am about to present work both in the REPL and during runtime. Online documentation, while plentiful and thorough, can often be time-consuming to navigate and distracting. Have you used a multi-tool? This useful tool provides many tools in one device, from a bottle opener to a screwdriver to a small knife. In my professional experience, I've found 5 tools in Python that I consider part of my Python multi-tool. Whether you are new to Python or have years of experience, these 5 tools are very helpful when learning something new in the language. We will begin with the help function. Calling the help function with no arguments enters an interactive session in Python's help utility, while passing an object will return help information specifically relating to the object. Next, we cover the dir function. This will return a list of items available in the current scope or items available in a module, class, or other object. Then we have the type function. This will return the type of the object passed. Suppose that I wanted to learn how to use the time module. After importing the module, I can then pass the time module to the dir command to obtain a list of items available in the module. In the resulting list, I can see there is an item named time I can then use the type function to obtain the type of that item, which is a built-in function or method. The help function can then be used to get more information on the time function. I begin to use the time function, and by using the type function, I can confirm that the type of the object returned is a float. Now I know that I can perform math operations on floats, so I can grab 2 times and subtract them to find the time difference. The ID function returns the identity of an object as an integer. This identity should be unique for different objects. Underneath, the implementation is such that you can consider this the address of the object in memory. Suppose that we want to explore how Python lists are handled when referenced or copied. Here we have a list defined called thing1. We then made a reference to thing1 called thing2. We used the copy module to make a copy of thing1. The ID function can help us confirm that the ID for thing1 and thing2 are the same, showing that thing2 is a reference to the same list as thing1. We can then use the ID function to confirm that copied thing is an actual copy of the original list. The inspect module provides useful information from live Python objects. This module only needs to be imported as it is part of the standard library. Using this module, you can obtain information such as the following. Here we see a class outline on the left. We can call a function on inspect called getMembers, pass it a condition, and it will return a list of items that match the condition. This code inspects our module for all the classes and then for the functions available in each class that is found. Now we have a compilation of classes and their functions. This could be used for information or even programmatically to process the class data. Another example of what the inspect module provides is obtaining source code programmatically. From our module, we can get a string return that is the code that comprises the class. Now we have a very powerful examination tool where we can obtain code from an object and have it available in our program. Help, dir, type, ID, and inspect are the tools that go together to make a very useful Python learning multi-tool. After many years of programming, I still use these tools to find my way around code bases that are new to me or while validating my code development as I work. Thank you for viewing my presentation, and I hope you find that this multi-tool is useful. Please enjoy the rest of the presentations, and best wishes in your Python journey.
All right, thanks, Craig. That was really great.
Thank you.
It seems like from the chat, we've got some minds being blown, folks just learning about some of this great online help that's built into the Python REPL.
Yeah, I think just to add, I think the place where I used those tools the most was when I was learning when I started learning the Pandas Library. If anybody's ever worked with the Pandas Library before, you kind of have an idea that it's very, very deep and goes into some really deep places. So just trying to maneuver around in there, sometimes it's what do you get back when you call a function? It's great to use the type function just to say, okay, what am I getting back? And then once you get that thing back, then you look up, okay, how do I use that thing, and so on and so forth. So it's been great in even just those those instances there. So
cool. Thanks very much, Craig. That was really awesome.
Thank you.
Before we go on to our next speaker, I want to remind you all about the Best of Pittsburgh contest voting that's going on right now. Please check out codeandsupply.co/x/bestofberg to go cast your vote for us. Or while I've got this up on the screen, you can pull up your fancy smartphone with a QR code reader, which is all of them nowadays. Just fire up the camera app and be able to quickly do this on your phone rather than having to type anything. Our next speaker for the lightning talk this evening is Teal Larson. Teal, are you ready to go?
I believe so.
All right.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. All right. All right, Teal, have at it.
I believe I am sharing my screen. Am I?
You're not yet sharing your screen.
It says I'm sharing. Stop sharing. It definitely says I'm sharing.
It is not yet showing up on.
I know.
Showing up for us.
Do you have to stop sharing, possibly?
I am not currently sharing, so
What?
I don't have anything to stop. Do you have? You're on a Mac, if I recall correctly. Do you have any security dialogue saying something like you need to grant the application permission to share, or anything like that?
I have shared from this browser before. Awkward. All right, well, I am not sure what to do because Firefox says that I am sharing my screen.
That's weird.
Firefox definitely shows you are sharing Firefox.
That's really weird. Okay, how about this? You and I can troubleshoot that offline. Derek, are you able to go? Are you able to go right now? Or Teal, can you try another browser, perhaps?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll get it. I was thinking if it doesn't work, I can just like send you the link, Colin.
Sure, we can figure that out if you're not able to share. Sometimes we hit problems with sharing permissions on Macs, especially Big Sur and newer. There's a strange thing where you have to grant permission to the browser to share the screen, but then you have to restart the browser in order to actually be able to share. So some folks get tripped up on that the first time they share in a particular browser. So we'll give Teal a second to come back and see if she is able to get that working. Otherwise, we'll proceed with you, Derek, and come back to Teal in a moment. Hey, we got Teal's screen now. Hooray. Teal, you're muted, but once you unmute, we'll be ready to go.
All right.
Awesome. Yay. Cool. Great.
All right.
All right. So next up is Teal Larson giving a brief talk about nothing.
Yeah. So my name is Teal Larson. And for the last year and a half or so, I have worked at various companies doing data pipeline tooling. And one topic that I've sort of fallen in love with is how SQL handles nothing. And I've run into a couple instances where it does not handle it how I'd expected. And so I'm going to share one of those with you. And so it started with a fairly normal looking table where I have customer information here with their names, emails, lifetime value of the customer, which is a sum of all of the purchases that they have ever made, and subscribed. And what was puzzling to me is that lifetime value would always populate as null if a user did not have any purchases. I would expect that the sum of no purchases would be 0. And so that sounded like a simple enough problem to solve, and it was not. So I thought that I could solve it by coalescing against 0. So a coalesce statement, if you're not familiar, should return whichever of the two pieces are passed to it, the first one that's not null. So I expected that if the sum of purchase price comes back as null, I would get back 0 as my lifetime value. And these were in a set because that was how we did our batch processing. That did not work. I, in fact, got back absolutely nothing for user 1. And I was puzzled as to why that was, because if I got back nothing, presumably I should have gotten a 0 from that coalesce. And so I dove down into this hole of why that was. Why can't I coalesce against nothing? And I started learning a little bit about set theory, which is essentially how SQL gathers its data. And this is an imperfect metaphor, but it's sort of what helped me wrap my mind around how this was all working. So if I go and check a PO box, presumably I could have a number of envelopes filled with some type of mail. I might have empty envelopes, or I might have a completely empty PO box. And so what I was ending up with here was a completely empty box. There was no data returned. In order for there to be a 0 here, I would have had to have, metaphorically, an empty envelope in that metaphorical PO box. But there has to be a way to solve this. There's got to be a way to make that table say 0. And first, there's a handful of different ways to think about nothing when we're talking about it. So we could have a value of 0, which is we know that something is there and that its value is 0. We could have null, which is more or less we know that something is there and its value is unspecified. But there is something equal to null. And we could have an empty set, which is we know nothing at all is there. And then if you work with JavaScript, they have a whole other nothingness, which is undefined. And so what was happening here was by the time that it was evaluating the second part of this, there was nothing for it to grab from purchases. And so that was why we would get back nothing at all. When you're running a SQL statement, you can run it with analyze or explain analyze if you want the timing and resources that are used to get more information about exactly what's happening in your query. So when you run that against the query that I had written, you end up with 4 rows that are being evaluated. So that was where things were tripping up. However, at this point, I knew that there had to be a way to do this. And so I tried a number of different things. I tried moving the coalesce statement one layer in, so summing and coalescing the purchase price with 0. This kind of surprised me, but the SQL engine ended up evaluating it more or less the same as when the sum was inside that coalesce. I tried outer joining on a users table, which did work if I had a particular table that had all of my users or whatever my primary key was. However, I didn't want to use that as a solution here because that may not be generalizable to all use cases. And then I dove into some more, I guess, crimes against SQL using union statements. And these were horrible, very bad SQL written. It did work at this point. I just needed to know that I could write a query that would give me back 0. And then option number 4, which is what I ended up actually implementing, was to solve it without SQL. Essentially, in our code base, I pre-filled, if it was aggregating a sum, I pre-filled all of the slots with 0 and then supplemented that with what I was getting back from the database. A much more reasonable solution, but let's look at the SQL just to see. So what I ended up doing was unioning against essentially this made up table. And it's out of control. It's out of control for 5 users. You can imagine if you're processing something against hundreds of rows of data at a time, this is completely inefficient. It's creating this whole other table in addition to processing all of the data that you're actually getting back and querying. It is a mess of SQL. It took a very long time to get this working. It did work. and it is a bad idea that you should not do. So essentially I have this fake table with the primary key and then a value of 0 so that there was something being returned here. Really, really forcing the issue. So takeaways, there are a lot of different meanings of nothing. They may not mean exactly what you think. And just because something is possible does not mean you should do it. A few other fun facts, because I do have some time remaining. I fell down to a really deep rabbit hole with learning about nothing. Fun facts about nothing. Crows have a concept of the number 0. There has been research done that crows conceptually understand 0. Fascinating. And then one great read, if you also want to learn more about the number 0, highly recommend The Biography of a Dangerous Idea. It goes into like the whole philosophy behind nothing and everything. And it's a surprisingly philosophical book. It has inspired me to consider taking a calculus class for fun. So it has that going for it. And that is all that I've got. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Teal. That was great. Learning about null and zero is a fascinating journey. I just noticed, I think it was on Lobsters today, there was a great discussion about why arrays are like numbered starting with 0.
Ooh, I have to read that.
Yeah, it was a good post, a good discussion as well. So thank you very much for presenting that. That was your first like live stream talk, right? I think we were talking about this earlier.
I did one in December.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Second.
So awesome. Great. Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you.
Our next speaker tonight is Derek Zhen. He's doing some fantastic work in the ethical sphere, and we're super happy to host him for this tonight. So, Derek, go ahead, take it away.
Okay, so I shared my screen, but is it coming up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'm Derek. I'm a undergrad at Swarthmore, but this summer I was in Pittsburgh doing some research at CMU about software ethics, basically. And so yeah, let me just kind of give the motivation behind my study, which is like there are kind of ethical issues in tech that we understand pretty well, and there are ethical issues in tech that we're just beginning to understand, right? So on the left, I've kind of put some of these that we're working on in a green box. For example, you might be familiar with ProPublica's article on the recidivism algorithm that was like, racist, even though it didn't take into race as a variable, right? Just kind of the machine learning picks up the bias from, validated data, right? Or, facial recognition algorithms working on some people better than others. And I guess like these kind of known biases in the AI sphere that's really like given tech ethics its moment in the media right now has led to a call for like fair, accountable, and transparent machine learning, right? Which is like a big branch of ethics right now. But on the other hand, so this article came out called the Mulching Proposal, which is what you see Henry Kissinger in the drone. It's like a hypothetical system where you would like recycle elderly people and turn them into Soylent Green, right? And the idea behind it is you could do a system like this fairly, accountably, and transparently, but it would still be a bad system because the business logic underlying all of the technology is fundamentally bad, right? And some other stuff like DoorDash's algorithm stealing tips from its employees, and the more you think about it, the more you realize like, wow, like they kind of have like an incentive to do that, right? Like a lot of the really crummy stuff, like trying to optimize your algorithm to pay people as little as possible. Is that really good, right? Or, is there something underlying the business logic that's really the cause of this ethical concern here? Or in general, like surveillance, especially in, China or China adjacent countries, is the use of technology that even if you do it like well and robustly, it's going to be bad because the purpose of it is bad. And so kind of we went back to the drawing board and wanted to take a practitioner-centric view, which is practitioners, anyone who works with software day to day. We wanted to know, like, if these changes happen, right? Like, it's probably going to come from people who work on this technology. So what do they consider as, an ethical concern? What really bothers them, right? Is our first research question. Our second research question is, what do they do when they developed factors increasing their ability to affect change. And this emphasis on talking to people who work on software day to day is really important, because if we're going to get any of these big harms rectified, it starts basically at the engineering level. So our method, we sent out a survey to folks on Reddit and Slack and actually Code and Supply. We got some great responses from there. We conducted follow-up interviews with people who left us their emails. And then, so that's kind of the main two parts of the study, is like we analyzed the survey free response data and also the interview transcripts. So again, looking at those 3 research questions, and we may or may not do a quantitative analysis to try to generalize our findings using like a Stack Overflow survey from 2018 that had an ethics portion on it. So we surveyed 285 practitioners. That many people filled out the survey, and 21 interviews were conducted, kind of between 20 to 75 minutes. And yeah, mostly our subjects were male, but that's kind of like reflecting industry bias, and most people have more than 10 years of experience. You can also see we got some good coverage geographically and org size. So the first research question, like, what do we learn, right? What are ethical concerns really? Like, what bothers people? And really, like, the staggering diversity of concerns that came up, like, surprised me, right? Because basically anywhere you could use software, there was like a concern there. People were concerned about gambling, they were concerned about military applications, surveillance, right? You can read off some of these. But also, like, we realized there were kind of differences in like scope when it came to the concern that really changed how practitioners looked at it, right? So if you worked at Google, but you were like ideologically against the idea of selling advertising, like you'll have a way harder time of like resolving that ethical concern than if you worked at a small like boutique firm and you had like a concern about fixing like a security vulnerability, right? These are both ethical concerns, because in both cases, like some harm can get incurred on someone, right, if you don't do your job well, or as a direct result of you doing your job some way. But these like lead to radically different resolutions, right? So kind of understanding that there's a spectrum of concerns going from least resistance to most resistance, least agency to most agency. You can be concerned when your boss asks you to put a GPS tracker on the app that you were working on for like 12 months, right? No concern before that, but suddenly this new feature like throws the whole thing out of whack, and that's a feature level concern. And that's something that a practitioner may or may not be able to resolve on their own. Or you could have a product level concern, like, if you're working at Google and suddenly you get pulled onto working at Project Maven, which is like a DoD contract, and you have problems with that, maybe you have to like band together with other like Googlers, right, to like kind of resist that. And so these issues call for different actions and lead to different resolutions, is kind of the takeaway here. The second takeaway, like, what kinds of actions do developers take? It ranges from like least risky to most risky actions. But these ones in gray are like ones that people have talked about but not actually done, right? So interviewers have mentioned like we really need to like organize, but I guess it didn't go successfully in those cases. Or people have talked about like chaining themselves to like critical infrastructure, if their companies really did something nasty. And that hasn't actually come up, like that hasn't been like actually done, but people talk about it. But you can see like different concerns kind of warrant different approaches, right? So there's not a one size fit all magic bullet. It's just like if you're working on a system that you think is vulnerable, maybe you want to implement a patch, and that's how you want to resolve the issue. But maybe if you're working on a larger, like a feature that you're really concerned about, you have to really align organizational stakeholders by escalating and trying to get that feature canceled, or trying to work it in a way in which it wouldn't incur as much harm. Or maybe like you also try to remove yourself from the equation if you can't stop the project by like, getting another job or trying to get yourself reassigned from that project. This one I thought was the most interesting question, which is like, what factors influence kind of what actions people take and how these issues get resolved, right? And the number one thing like everyone talks about, and this is such a no-brainer, but there was actually no previous literature talking about this, is like precarity, right? Is like you don't want to rock the boat if you're not in a good place financially. And this has come up over and over again. Do you have like family that can take you in if you're homeless, right? Like, do you have good skills so that you can like look for another job easily, like good credentials, right? Like these things really impact how much people are like willing to speak up, how much people are willing to risk, right? And also we see like people who are pretty senior are able to kind of throw their weight around in like bigger issues than you would think, right? People can like, you can kind of get other people in your organization's respect more easily and their consensus more easily, or you can like threaten to quit if you're more senior and affect more change. And obviously what practitioners see as issues are going to depend on like their temperament, their personality, their ideology. And from the organizational factors, right, you have this whole set of, you know, is this organization a nonprofit? Do they actually care? Do they have core values, right? Like we had one person who worked at a for-profit company who was contracting like for the NSA and took problem with that, and then switched to a nonprofit, right? They started working for Mozilla, and there was like a complete culture change, totally determined like how ethical issues were approached at work. And so, yeah, we're right now we're just kind of like at the point where we're trying to condense all these ideas into like a coherent narrative and write a paper. But you know, yeah, I had such a blast working on this project this summer. I love doing qualitative research and talking to software engineers. And I was a software engineer briefly, so I really relate to a lot of the things they were talking about. So yeah, the beautiful thing is that this all kind of flows together, right? It's all part of one story. And yeah, thank you for your attention. That's my contact information if you want to take a screenshot or something. And yeah, I'll blast the survey in this chat if it's okay, because we're still taking respondents. So yeah, thank you guys.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. That was great. Derek, I think we met about a month ago or 2 months ago or so at a build night, and immediately I was fascinated with his work, and I was so excited that he was able to come and present for this lightning talk night.
Yeah, thank you.
We do have it looks like we have a question from Andrew. Andrew, can you unmute and ask your question? Go ahead, Andrew. If you want to ask your question in the chat, or you want to unmute to. Oh, sorry, wrong button. No worries, Andrew. All right. Looks like our next talk up is Sarah Withy. Sarah, are you ready?
I hope I am. I haven't tested screen sharing.
All right. Well, we'll do it live. We'll see what happens. All right. Yay! There's a screen share.
Yay.
All right,
Sweet.
Sarah, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Withy. Been Code & Supply for several years, 4 or 5 years now. So I'm happy to be part of another lightning talk. Today I want to talk a little bit about managing an open source project, especially with a lot of what we call drive-by commits. So before I go into that, I'll talk a little bit about the project. If you've talked to me in the last couple of years, you may have heard me talk about Code Thesaurus, which I like to call the polyglot developer reference tool. So you can take any 2 languages and kind of compare their programming structures side by side. So what might this look like? Well, if you want to write a hello world in Rust, you might have something on the left. If you write a hello world in Go, you might have something like on the right. You can really easily kind of see the comparison between a lot of the structures there and what you would need to do this. Slightly more weirdly, you could go, let's say you want to compare Rust to low code. Low code's a little bit more bizarre because it's an esoteric language after lowcats. But you can still kind of see like, hey, there's a standard in out there. You just make some text visible. BTW is your way to write a comment. Kfix by is the way you end your program. So you can still kind of see a lot of comparisons with the structures there. Slightly less noticeable is what I'll call brain fudge to keep this family friendly. It's very weird. All the pluses and random symbols definitely mean strange things, but if we broke it down, you could probably still see what these things look like. So Code Thesaurus is hopefully a way to be able to do this with any 2 programming languages you'd want to compare side by side. This is a hugely ambitious project. To be able to do any programming language, whether I've touched it or not, it really just would require so many hours of work. The only way it made sense to me was to open source it. So as I've been working on it, I've been throwing it on GitHub, sometimes even Twitch, or stream like some of the development on it on Twitch. And I've gotten lucky, word of mouth, or it's spread through word of mouth. It's had, I think, 99 contributors now, so almost 100. Here's a collection of some of those people in this image. And this is absolutely great. It's really wonderful, but a lot of things have sort of popped up in the learning to manage an open source project. So I'll start with the commitment of committers, as I call it. Colin ended up saying to me once that open source has high value one-time contributions. So, at your workplace, you have the same group of people. They're constantly working on a project. They're adding lots of code. They're able to review each other. Stuff that's not so great can be easily turned around really quickly to fix bugs and stuff like that. With open source, you don't necessarily have a lot of that. A lot of people love hearing about this project and then making promises. So it's just yeah, I'm going to go home tonight. I'm going to pull down your project. I'm going to work on something. And almost nobody does. But we also have a lot of plans that people talk about and they follow through on it. I've had pull requests added to the project where they've eventually abandoned it, where I suggest if they make a change, then I don't ever hear back from the people. Some people claim issues and they don't work on them, which is probably the most common thing that happens. Sometimes they need reminders. Sometimes they just get a little over their head when they commit to working on something. I even had a case where one person made really, really, really great changes, but they tweaked so much of this that I didn't know how it worked anymore. And they didn't really update any of the documentation or anything. So we had to kind of work around that. So there's a lot of sort of interesting problems that pop up when you work with open source maintaining that don't like in your day job. So one way to fix it would be add some documentation. So in the beginning, I made some initial documentation. It's grown since then. I've also started working on kind of revamping the whole thing so it's a little bit more easier to navigate and better for newbies, especially as I knew there would be a lot of questions in the beginning. So there's a lot of, well, why did you approach it this way? Why didn't you do it this way? This way seems like it'd be easier than the way you took it. And so I made an architecture page just to specifically talk about all those kinds of things. I also don't know who's coming into this. So it could be people brand new to open source. It could be people that are in college and really haven't had a lot of experience. It could be people that have had 20 years experience and they, really do know a lot of what they're doing. I kind of have to write documentation that really reflects all of these people. So I aim it for beginners, but I try not to make it too, worded out or watered down. So people feel like idiots if they're reading it. But the flip side is they might not read it. I would say the vast majority of people don't actually read it. So that's something to keep in mind as you're kind of dealing with the people that come and go from the project. One thing I have learned though is to always make sure you're encouraging and supportive. The same with if you're volunteering for a nonprofit, people aren't paid. You really want to treat them well because you value their time that they're putting in. So I always try to make sure I'm appreciative of the stuff that's happened. So here's a couple PR comments, the first one, I was really grateful somebody caught something that I just completely missed. And so I was glad they caught it and they merged it in. The other one was from somebody that has been updating the NIM language. It's the one person that knows NIM and they're just I'm dedicated to making sure code the source has NIM in it. And so they always are there updating extra things to it. So even they made this one on Christmas Eve. So I'm just hey, I appreciate it. Go have some great holidays afterwards. Another thing I found is that you really have to expect the unexpected. Some examples include PRs for pull requests for features you've never asked for. That was kind of what happened on the screenshot here where somebody made this pull request. I'm kind of thinking what are you thinking when you did this? And so I kind of talked about, hey, the project's sort of set up this way. I'm not quite sure what you were going for when you made this PR. Can you tell me a little bit about what you were thinking and reasoning? And they did. They ended up saying some things. We kind of worked out our differences on some thoughts and eventually merged it in. So there's a little bit of that. Lots of people misunderstand some of the issues. Some of it might be they just think of it as it's going to be really easy, and so they go in and they don't really understand how the project works. Sometimes it's just a badly worded issue, which is on me, so I go back and I revise issues every once in a while. Sometimes there's not great code. I have to kind of go back and be like, hey, can you tweak this? Can you tweak that? Can you move this over there? Things like that. And then sometimes disappearing people. I've had a couple of PRs. They added it in. I've asked for changes, never heard back from them. And then I'm kind of in this weird spot, like, well, I want to take your code. I want to give you credit for it, but I also it's not really in a shape to grab it right now. So what do I do? I think at least in one of those, I closed it anyway, and she said, I'm sorry, I'm doing this. I'm more than happy to reopen this pull request. But also another one, I think I finally just merged it in and said, this is a tiny change, I'll just go do it. So I've kind of had issues both ways. Another thing that's really important I've found is I, as a maintainer, need to do whatever I can to save myself time. Every PR, even if it's just a tiny, one line of code, means I'm spending at least a few minutes on it, reviewing it, making sure the code makes sense, making sure it's readable, making sure, stuff doesn't break if I were to merge this in. I've started to find that some of the actions I do really can be done by a machine. So I've spent more time building some efficient, continuous integration pipelines. You can see some of them there. A couple of them I think are old, but and I'm also working on new ones as I know I'm probably going to get a bigger flood of pull requests in Hacktoberfest this year. I've also found if I spend more time delegating the really simpler things I know are easier for random strangers to pick up, that means I can spend more time doing the more nitty gritty, more domain knowledge specific stuff that I can work on. That's harder for other people to pick up. Over Hacktoberfest last year, I had 71 PRs, which is a really lovely problem to have, but that means there's at least 2 a day. And it peaked up over time. So it was actually really slow in the beginning, and I would have up to 5 or 6 a day at the height. So it meant, I'm spending even more time trying to navigate these. So anything I can do to kind of automate any of these things really simplified my time. So it's kind of the nutshells of open source things I've learned over the past several years working on this project. I would absolutely love it if any of you contribute to open source. If you have the ability to, maybe even consider Code Thesaurus. We have all sorts of needs. Any programming language we can take it, even if it means a little bit of extra work on my part. So thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Have a lovely rest of the evening. Enjoy the rest of the talks.
All right. Thank you very much, Sarah. That was really great. Code Thesaurus is such an incredible resource that I've pointed people to, and I've used myself a lot as I've been learning Python about the last 18 months. So it's great to have such a wonderful and complete resource.
I appreciate hearing that. And I just went into it trying to build the tool I knew I would use and kind of hoped other people would use along the way. So
Yes,
I appreciate hearing that.
Cool. I thought I saw a question go up, but I think whoever put it up may have dropped it. I think it was just a mispress. Yes, I think it was a mispress. All right, so we have just a couple of talks left. One pre-recorded talk from Rory Brenner, who's not able to make it tonight. That's about 8 minutes long. And then after that talk, we're going to shut down our stream. Our last speaker, Michael, has asked that we don't stream his talk or we don't record his talk. And so we're going to shut off the stream. The 8x8 conference that we're recording this on is still going to stay up. So all of you who are joining us through that, you'll still be able to watch the talk. But those of you on YouTube, sorry. All right. So before we get into that, though, before we get into this second to last talk, I do want to do a quick round of messaging. Of course, I already talked a little bit about the Best of Pittsburgh contest that we're in for best co-working space. So please do check that out. codeandsupply.co/x/bestofberg. Please do vote for us and encourage your friends, coworkers to vote for us as well. We don't really know what the ramifications of winning this could be, but please indulge my competitive spirit a little bit, and we'll see if we can actually win it and see what happens when we do win it. It'd be really cool. For another way you can support Code and Supply while supporting yourself and others is to participate in our job board. You can post your jobs. You can look for a job, and your jobs posted there will get syndicated out to Slack and Twitter, as well as be included in our monthly newsletter. You can do that as long as you are giving us money in any way. We also do have some free access to the job board for certain types of organizations and nonprofits of a certain size, small development teams, trying to give some startups some assistance in hiring. But supporting Code and Supply, it takes just $10 a month. You can give us something that helps. Code and Supply content is nearly always freely given, but is not without cost. It takes a considerable amount of my time. It takes a considerable amount of our volunteers' time, such as Sarah's, who runs our conduct team, and our surveys team. That we just concluded our compensation survey for 2022, and we're itching to get that report out to you. Hopefully, we'll have that report out. We'll have it out before the end of the year, but we're hoping to get it out before the end of October, so that you can be equipped with all kinds of knowledge going into the winter and the 2023 hiring season. So our second to last talk of the night, last talk of the stream, is a talk from Rory Brenner. Rory Brenner is the host of Nerd Night Pittsburgh, and I'll let him introduce himself in this pre-recorded talk. Ready, go. Unless that link's not going to work. All right. Ready, go. Uh-oh. Looks like this particular link is not working, so give me 1 second to double check it. It is not running for anybody, right? Yes. All right, looks like I need to list the video. I've got it marked as unlisted. So we'll temporarily make it public and see what happens. Oh no. Give another try at a link here. Uh-oh, it looks like YouTube and 8x8 are saying no to this particular video. I'm not really quite sure why. I'm reviewing my settings real quick. One moment. Got one other trick up my sleeve. Play it locally and let's see what happens. Nope. All right. So I will play this from a particular thing on my desktop so that we have got something here. So give me 1 second. Yep. Never know what's going to happen on a live stream. Suddenly everything could blow up. And of course, this is no different. I think I'm going to have to share my whole screen in order for this to work. So here we go. Get to peer behind the mask. Ready to go.
Hey, thanks for having me out to do a Code and Supply lightning talk. My name is Rory. I am a robotics researcher, but I'm here to talk to you tonight about Nerd Night. Nerd Night is a mix between a stand-up comedy show and a TED Talk. The group is an international organization, and I used to attend their events all the time in Los Angeles. When I moved to Pittsburgh, I just kind of assumed there would be a chapter here, and when I found out there wasn't, I shot them an email and said, hey, Pittsburgh's a really fun, nerdy city. They'd be really into this. You should do a nerd night here. And they just emailed me back and were like, you should do a nerd night there. So I did. As the organizer and MC, I start out every show with a segment called This Month in Nerdery, where I just talk about cool stuff I've seen on the internet recently. Gets the crowd kind of warmed up for the idea of silly PowerPoint presentations. With that intro, my lightning talk is just going to be my most recent This Month in Nerdery. If you think it's cool, check us out at the website that will be posted at the end, and come out for a live show sometime. Hope you enjoy. Who out there is just psyched about that renaming to Acrisure Stadium? But it is a topic of light nerdery, because it turns out Acrisure is a financial technology company. Despite their name, where I would have guessed it was either a rebrand of Acme from Looney Tunes, which now produces Bluetooth-enabled smart anvils, or maybe the cutting edge in adult diaper technology. But no, for those who are curious, our stadium's new name is for a company that uses machine learning to make decisions about anything related to finance. And our new football overlords do a lot of interesting things, but what grabbed my attention the most was their options for insurance. Because they offer basic insurance, protect what matters to you with a solution for your needs. But then they also offer reinsurance, which my understanding is the process of insuring another company's insurance offerings. And with this kind of convoluted financial nonsense, I just feel like the rabbit hole is probably going to go even deeper the longer they stick around. I suspect in their upcoming list of products, you're also going to find reinsurance, which of course would ensure the insured insurance as sure as seashells by the seashore, which logically would then lead to reinsurance, which is just a lure for the entrepreneurs at Acrisure to ensure that their cure can endure even the grandeur of the manure of a rancor. And then finally, you've just got insurance. Which legend says is the only thing that will protect you from normies renaming your goddamn stadiums. But in a topic of much more nerdery and generally better news, the James Webb Space Telescope released its first images this month. Yeah, and they're awesome. They make pictures from Hubble look like they were taken from a 1998 Nintendo Game Boy camera. And yeah, y'all want to see some? So I'll tell you a bit about the telescope as we go through them. These pictures are taken with an infrared camera as opposed to RGB. This is because very far away objects are easier to observe in infrared. The mirrors used to collect light are 6.5 meters across, and they are made of beryllium instead of silver. This is because beryllium is better at holding its shape across a wide range of temperatures. And to keep the temperature steady by reflecting away light and heat from our sun, the telescope is protected by an enormous sun shield made of a material called captain. And for further protection, there's a tiny robot keeping an eye out for pesky four-dimensional space whales. Coming in at a final price of $10 billion, some people have been saying that this is a waste of money. I mean, for that price, the US military could have paid for almost 5 additional B-2 Spirit bombers to be collecting dust in a hangar in Nevada. Or at only $5 billion a pop, we could have bought Malaysian business magnate Robert Kuok 2 more solid gold yachts, ensuring that no one ever thinks he has a tiny penis again. Ironically, the same people who would have rather spent the tax dollars on bombers would also have been happy to spend $50 billion, as long as James Webb was a high-velocity assault telescope. But to address their point, spending $10 billion on the world's greatest desktop wallpaper machine would arguably be a bit of a waste. But these pictures were just taken as a way to kind of get the public excited about the project. There's a lot of really cool science that's going to be coming out of this too. Anyone think this is a sexy picture? Yes. Then I'm glad you're already taking a seat. Because the James Webb Space Telescope is going to allow us to see back through time. And this is a picture of a very young galaxy. It's only 300 million years old. And since the telescope is picking up light, what it's really seeing is what was happening when that light was originally emitted. And because it's able to collect light from 12 billion light years away, what we're looking at is what was happening 12 billion years ago, giving insight into what the universe was like just after the Big Bang. And now that we have achieved not only this incredible resolution, but also the ability to see through time, experts have finally been able to answer an age-old question that has plagued scientists since the late 90s. Why do kids love the taste of Cinnamon Toast Crunch? Turns out it's really sugary. Another awesome thing that this telescope will help find is additional exoplanets, which is a kind of elitist term, meaning a planet that's from the wrong side of the Kuiper Belt. And that's really everyone but here. But by absorbing which wavelengths are absorbed as light passes through an exoplanet's atmosphere, we'll be able to tell what the atmosphere is composed of, perhaps even allowing us to find new Earth-like planets we may eventually want to explore. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there in the infinite cosmos, we'll even finally find a new Earth that is actually flat. I'm sure you can all now see, the James Webb Space Telescope is a technological marvel. The likes of oh, sorry, I really have to take this. Hello? What? Well, sorry y'all, but they renamed it. Now it's the Akershire Telescope. All right, and that'll do it for me. Let's give a warm welcome to Ray.
All right. That was Rory Brenner talking from Nerd Night Pittsburgh. Nerd Night Pittsburgh is a bit of a I think it's a bit of a comedy event. I think it occurs at Spirit most of the time, if I remember the information correctly. But do check it out. I'm definitely going to try to make it out to a future one now that I know about it. Yeah, Spirit in Lawrenceville. It's been confirmed in chat. So great. All right, so we've come to the end of our streaming content. I already kind of did our big messages. You know, join Code and Supply at codeandsupply.co/join. Check out some jobs. Post your jobs at codeandsupply.co/jobs. Check out some merch at codeandsupply.co/store. And of course, and perhaps most importantly right now, go vote for us at codeandsupply.co/x/bestofberg. And maybe we'll win the best co-working space in Pittsburgh. So that's it for our streamed content. We have one more talk tonight. So those of you on the 8x8 chat, on the 8x8 video conference, don't hit that exit button just quite yet. Michael's up next. Michael is going to be talking about art and technology events in Pittsburgh, just an overview of past events and what's coming up for the future. So don't go away. I'm going to stop the stream in a moment after I throw up our outro. Thank you all for watching, those of you who are on the public stream, and we'll catch you again some other time.